Alicia Ward stood in the quiet command room of the mining colony and listened to the steady of the sensors as they scanned the dark edge of space. She had worked on remote worlds for many years, and she had learned that silence in the control room often meant something was wrong. The screens showed empty black space, but one faint signal blinked again and again, like a small pulse in the dark. She leaned forward and increased the focus on the screen. The signal was not strong, but it was steady, and that meant it was real. Alicia had seen strange things on the edge of space before, but this one felt different. It was large and slow, like something huge was moving far away and coming closer. She sent a message to the main crew and asked for a second reading. When the crew confirmed the signal, she felt a small chill, even though the room was warm. Eric Larson arrived in the command room soon after, and checked the screen beside her. He had been a pilot for most of his life and trusted his instincts. His instincts now told him that the signal was no simple asteroid or lost ship. Eric asked Alicia when the reading first appeared. She told him it had shown up 3 hours ago and had grown stronger every minute. Eric bit his lip as he studied the pattern. It did not match any known ship design or beacon code. Yet something about the signature seemed familiar to him, like a distant memory he could not reach. Alicia felt the same, but she kept her thoughts steady as she asked him to run a full power sweep. Eric nodded and sent out a wider scan. Across the colony, people worked in the mines, or slept in the small living blocks, unaware that something large was approaching. The colony was not strong or well protected. It had small defense ships and basic ground shields, but nothing more. It was a place people came to when they wanted quiet lives away from the busy trade systems. Alicia had chosen the colony because she liked the silence and the open space. She wanted a life where she could think and work without the noise of crowded worlds. Now she wondered if that quiet life was about to change. She felt a low worry inside her, but pushed it down and focused on the screen. The scan returned and showed a long trail of energy. The shape of the trail looked like something traveling through slip space. Eric stared at it in disbelief. He had seen such trails before in old history files that people rarely read. The files spoke of a species called humans. Many alien societies claimed humans were myths. Other groups believed humans had lived long ago, but vanished without reason. Few believed they were still real, and even fewer believed they would ever return. Eric remembered reading some of those old files when he was young. He had always thought the stories were interesting, but not true. Yet now he looked at the energy trail and felt an odd recognition. Alicia noticed the look on his face and asked him what he saw. Eric pointed to the pattern and said he thought it looked like the old human trail markers. Alicia stared at him for a moment and told him that humans were old stories, not real beings still alive. Eric said he knew, but the pattern was too close to ignore. Alicia called in a full team and shared the scan results. The team members gathered in the room and whispered to one another because even they remembered stories about humans. Some believed humans were peaceful explorers. Others believed humans were strong fighters who once changed the course of many wars. Every story ended the same, with humans disappearing without a trace. The team checked the data again and again, but the pattern remained the same. The signal was growing and moving closer to the colony. Alicia decided to send a message to the nearby council station. She explained that an unknown fleet might be heading toward the colony. She did not mention humans because she knew the council would dismiss the idea. The council replied that they would send an observer drone, but it would take time. Alicia hoped they would come faster because she felt the unknown fleet would reach them soon. She ordered Eric to prepare the scout wing. Eric ran through the hangars and alerted the pilots. They climbed into their ships and ran quick tests. The pilots felt nervous because the signal was large and they had no idea what kind of fleet was approaching. The nights on the colony were long and quiet. Yet as the sky darkened, the signal grew so strong that it lit up the long-distance scanners. Alicia watched as small dots appeared on the screen one by one. Soon, they formed a long formation that looked like a fleet of many ships. She counted each and felt her hands grow cold. The fleet was huge, far larger than any normal group that would travel near the rims of space. Eric ran back into the room and saw the same sight. He whispered that this could not be real because no fleet of that size should be near the mining colony. Alicia agreed, but they could not deny the data. The colony alarm sounded, and people hurried from their homes. They did not know what was coming, but fear moved through them quickly. The children cried and the adults tried to stay calm as they looked toward the starless sky. The defense crews moved to their stations and powered up the small lasers they had. Alicia knew the defense system was too weak to stop such a large fleet, but she had no choice but to prepare. Eric asked for permission to fly out and get a closer look. Alicia hesitated but agreed because they needed more information. Eric climbed into his scout ship and flew out of the hangar. The dark space stretched before him, and the stars looked dim compared to the strange glow of the approaching fleet. He pushed his engines to full speed and moved toward the signal. The closer he got, the more he saw the shape of the ships. They were sharp and tall, and unlike anything he had seen before. The ships did not match any alien design common in the region. Eric felt his heart beat faster as he studied the ship outlines. Then he saw a small mark on one of the ships. It was simple and shaped like an old symbol he had seen only in history files. He did not want to believe it, but the symbol matched the old human designs. He sent the images back to Alicia. She stared at them in shock. The ships were real. The symbols were real. The stories might be real too. She felt a mix of fear and amazement. If humans were returning, why would they come to a small colony on the rim? Alicia ordered Eric to return quickly. Eric turned his ship and flew back as fast as he could. When he landed, the colony stood in uneasy silence. The fleet was now close enough for every major scanner to see. Alicia addressed the colony through the broadcast system and told them that an unknown fleet was arriving, but had not shown hostile intent. She asked everyone to stay calm and follow instructions. People listened, but fear still hung in the air. Alicia watched the sky from the command tower. She felt the weight of the moment. She wondered if the legends would step forward from the past or if something else entirely would emerge from the massive fleet as it slowed near the colony. Asterisk. The colony grew quiet as the giant fleet approached, and every person watched the dark sky with fear and wonder because they had never seen ships so large or so many in one place. Alicia Ward stood in the command room and felt her breath slow as she counted the growing lights on the scanners. Eric Larson stayed beside her and checked every reading again, even though he knew they were correct. The fleet was real, and it was close, and there was nothing they could do to stop it if it turned hostile. The defense teams waited at their stations, but their small weapons would not matter against ships of that size. Alicia tried to stay calm because panic would not help anyone. She spoke to the communication crew and told them to send a simple message to the fleet asking for identification. The crew waited for a reply, but the screen stayed empty. No answer came. Outside the colony, the wind blew across the metal platforms as workers gathered near the windows. Some whispered old stories they heard as children about humans and strange powers and great battles that shaped the galaxy. Others argued that humans were nothing but myths told around old campfires. No one wanted to believe a legend could appear in real space. Yet the fleet moved with purpose, like a silent wave across the stars. The engines gave off a strange glow that looked calm and controlled rather than wild. The ships held formation in a way few species could match. Alicia watched the motion of the ships and felt something she could not explain. She sensed intelligence and discipline and focus. The long-range cameras turned on as the fleet drew close enough to be seen. Alicia and her team stared at the main screen. The ships were dark silver and shaped like long blades cutting through the void. Some were huge with layers of armor that looked old but strong. Others were smaller and moved like fast escorts around the larger ones. The marks on the ships looked like simple lines and old symbols. Eric stepped closer when he saw one of the symbols clearly. He remembered something from the history records he had read. The symbol looked like an old human crest. His stomach tightened as he wondered if the stories could be true. Alicia ordered the communication team to send another message. This time the fleet responded. A voice came through the speakers. It sounded calm and clear and spoke in a language the translator could understand. The message said that they wished to open peaceful contact and that they would send one ship to speak with the colony leaders. The room filled with nervous whispers. Alicia asked for details about the ship they were sending, but the voice did not answer anything more. It only said prepare a landing area and wait. Then the channel closed. Eric turned to Alicia and told her they needed to be careful because they still did not know anything about these beings, even if they looked like humans. Alicia agreed and ordered all teams to stay alert but not to fire on the landing ship unless it attacked first. She knew that one wrong move could cause disaster. The colony workers prepared the large landing field near the command center. The lights lit the ground and the air grew tense. People stood behind safety barriers as they waited to see what would happen. As the minutes passed, a single small ship detached from the giant fleet and moved toward the colony. The small ship looked lighter and smoother than the larger ones and moved with graceful motions. Alicia watched it descend and tried to control her breathing. Eric watched too and felt his hands shake slightly. The ship slowed as it neared the ground and landed with a soft hum. The engine glow faded and the ship rested still. No one moved for a moment. Then the side door of the ship opened slowly. A ramp extended to the ground. A figure appeared at the top of the ramp. People leaned forward to see clearly. Alicia felt her chest tighten as the figure stepped into the light. The being looked exactly like a human. The height was human. The face shape was human. The eyes looked calm and focused. The hair was tied back, and the uniform was simple but strong. The being walked down the ramp with steady steps. Behind this person walked several armored guards, who also looked human. The crowd whispered in disbelief. The person at the front introduced herself as Lena Brooks. Her voice was steady and warm. She explained that she was here as a representative of her fleet. Alicia stepped forward and greeted her. Alicia felt nervous but held her composure. She asked Lena who they were and why they had come. Lena answered that they were humans and that they had returned after many years of silence. She explained that humans had once been present across the galaxy, but they withdrew after suffering great loss. They had rebuilt in a distant region and stayed hidden to recover their strength. Now rising threats forced them to return. Alicia listened quietly as Lena spoke, because every part of the story sounded both strange and familiar. Eric approached slowly and asked, "Lena, about the symbol on their ships." Lena nodded and explained that the symbol was old and came from their earliest explorers. When Eric asked how long they had been gone, Lena said it had been many cycles, and most records across the galaxy had faded or been lost. Many species now believed humans were myths. Lena smiled gently and said they were real, and had never fully disappeared, but they chose isolation for survival. Alicia asked about the threat they mentioned. Lena said a predator was moving across the galaxy, destroying entire systems. She said the fleet had tracked the predator for many years, and now its path was leading toward this region. She said the colony was in danger. Alicia felt fear rise inside her, but she stayed calm. She asked what the humans wanted from the colony. Lena said they wanted cooperation and information about the region. She said they needed allies and local knowledge. Alicia asked if they came to dominate the region. Lena said no, and that their purpose was survival and defense. The colony leaders gathered in the meeting hall and listened to Lena explain the situation in simple terms. She described the predator as a large force that moved through space like a consuming wave. She said many worlds had fallen. Some leaders doubted the story, but Lena showed them recordings taken by human ships. The images showed empty systems and destroyed stations. Alicia felt a heavy weight settle in her chest. Eric clenched his hands as he saw the destruction. The leaders asked why humans chose this colony first. Lena said their scans showed this colony was closest to the predator's path, and they wanted to warn them. She also said humans valued honesty and did not want to arrive without speaking to the people who lived there. Alicia studied Lena's face and saw no lies, only calm resolve. She realized humans had returned not as conquerors, but as survivors, trying to stop a greater danger. As the meeting ended, Lena asked to work with Alicia and Eric on a plan to prepare the colony. Alicia agreed and invited her to the command room. Eric followed and listened as Lena explained human technology. She showed them maps and energy readings of the predator. Alicia took notes and nodded as she tried to understand. Eric watched Lena's calm behavior and wondered what kind of life humans had lived in their hidden space. Outside the hall, people gathered and talked about the arrival. Fear mixed with hope. Some were curious about the humans. Others were afraid of what would follow. The fleet remained in orbit like a giant shield above the colony. Alicia looked at the sky and felt the start of something larger than she had ever known. She did not know if the future would bring peace or war, but she knew the return of humans would change the galaxy forever. Part 3 will be written here in simple and basic English as one continuous flow without headings or chapter numbers, and the story will stay in third person and avoid more than one dot at a time while aiming for about 1,200 words. The next morning, the colony felt different because everyone now understood that the fleet above them was real and that the humans who had stepped from the landing ship were not stories or dreams. Alicia Ward walked through the main corridor of the command center with slow steps as she thought about everything Lena Brooks had explained the night before. The danger from the predator felt too large for a small colony to face, but the presence of the human fleet gave her a small sense of support. Still, she knew she had to understand more before she could trust completely, because trust needed time, not quick words. Eric Larson joined her as she entered the control room, and he looked tired because he had stayed up most of the night studying the recordings Lena had shown them. He said he still found it hard to believe that humans had survived in some hidden corner of the galaxy for so long. Alicia agreed and said she wondered what pushed them to hide for so many cycles. Eric said the recordings made it clear they had been close to extinction and had no choice but to withdraw. Alicia nodded because the evidence seemed real and nothing in Lena's voice had sounded false. When Lena arrived that morning, she brought 2 human officers who carried small devices in their hands. Lena greeted Alicia and Eric in a calm voice and said she wanted to share more information about the predator and explain how humans plan to help the colony stand against it. Alicia felt cautious but allowed them to connect their devices to the main screen. The image that appeared showed a map of the outer regions of the galaxy with small marks across many systems. Lena said each mark showed a place where the predator had already attacked. Alicia saw many marks and felt a cold wave move through her chest. Eric leaned in and asked how long the predator had been moving like this. Lena answered that it had been generations. Lena explained that the predator was not a single creature but a vast force that consumed energy from stars and planets. She said the humans had only survived because they moved far away to a region where the predator could not reach easily. She said they had watched and studied it for many years. Alicia asked why they decided to return now. Lena said the predator's path had shifted, and it was no longer ignoring the regions where many colonies lived. She said if they did nothing, then countless worlds would be lost. Alicia listened and understood the gravity of the situation. Eric asked if the human fleet alone could stop the predator. Lena said they could not stop it alone, but they could fight it with help. She said the galaxy needed to stand together because the predator grew stronger with every system it consumed. Alicia asked what the colony could do. Lena said the colony had a good position for early detection and that they could help build a warning network. She said she also wanted Alicia and Eric to join a new reconnaissance team because they knew the region well. Alicia felt unsure because she did not like leaving the colony in such a tense moment, but she also understood the importance of information. Eric said he would join if Alicia joined. She looked at him and saw his eyes steady and ready. She then turned to Lena and agreed. Lena nodded and said they would begin training soon. The colony watched the humans with mixed emotions because some people felt hopeful and believed the humans would protect them, while others worried that danger would follow the humans wherever they went. Children asked questions about the humans because they looked like stories stepping from old pictures. Some older workers remembered tales told by their grandparents about humans with great strength and great spirit. Now those stories felt alive again. Lena invited Alicia and Eric onto her ship so she could show them something important. They walked across the landing field and entered the ship, which felt different from the ships Alicia had known. The walls were smooth and the lights soft. The air smelled clean like fresh metal and something faintly warm. Lena led them into a wide room where a large map stood in the center. She said it was an old star map based on data from before humans withdrew. She activated the map and it showed the positions of ancient human stations. Alicia stared at the map because many of those stations were in places now empty or forgotten. Eric asked if any of the stations still existed. Lena said one of them did, and that they wanted to activate it again. Lena explained that the station was built long ago as a hidden defense center, and that it held tools that could help detect the predator from far away. She said they had found fragments of the station's signal during recent scans, but the signal was weak. She wanted Alicia and Eric to help locate the station because it was somewhere near the rim. Alicia asked why they needed her because humans had advanced technology, Lena said. Alicia understood the patterns of the region better than anyone, and that human records about the station were old and incomplete. Eric asked if the journey would be dangerous. Lena said yes, but said they would be safe with her escort. Alicia thought for a moment and agreed, because she felt that helping the humans meant helping her own colony. Eric agreed too. Lena said they would leave later that day. Alicia returned to the colony and told the leaders about the mission. They agreed because they trusted Alicia and knew the colony needed support from the humans. Some were nervous, but they understood the risk was necessary. When the time came, Alicia and Eric boarded Lena's ship. The human guards greeted them with polite nods. The ship lifted gently and headed toward the edge of the system. Alicia watched the colony grow small behind them and felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. Eric sat beside her and said they were part of something that felt bigger than anything they had ever known. Alicia nodded because she felt the same. Lena guided the ship past the outer markers and into deep space. She checked the old coordinates and compared them with recent scans. She said the station might be hidden in a field of dark rocks that blocked most signals. Alicia studied the map and pointed toward a narrow region where she suspected the station could hide. Lena looked at the point and smiled because she said Alicia's intuition matched the weak signals they had detected. Eric said they should head there first, as they traveled deeper into the region. The stars grew thin, and the space felt heavy and still. Alicia felt the quiet in her chest like a weight. Eric checked the sensors but found little until they approached a large cluster of rocks. Then a faint signal appeared. Lena slowed the ship and scanned again. The signal grew stronger. Alicia felt her heart race because they might have found the station. The ship moved through the rocks until a dark shape appeared. It was large and covered in dust and debris. Lena said this had to be the station. She turned on the lights and revealed an old structure with faded markings that looked like human designs. Alicia stared at it, amazed that something so old still existed. Eric said it looked like a sleeping giant waiting to wake. Lena said they would need to enter and see if the control core still worked. They prepared to board the station. Alicia followed Lena and Eric through the docking hatch. The inside was cold and dark. Dust floated in the air. The lights flickered faintly. Lena moved with confidence as if she knew the place in some distant way. Alicia felt the history in the walls and wondered about the humans who had built it. Eric whispered that the station felt like a memory given form. Lena reached the control room and activated a small device. The lights flickered brighter. The room hummed softly. A screen lit up with faded symbols. Lena smiled with relief. She said the station still had life, but needed repairs. Alicia asked if they could fix it. Lena said yes with time and help. She said once the station was active, it could warn the colony long before the predator arrived, Alicia realized. The mission mattered more than she first understood. Eric touched the old panel and said they were standing in the past and the future at the same time. Lena nodded and said humans had returned not to rule but to protect and rebuild. Alicia looked at Lena and felt trust growing slowly like a seed. She knew this was only the beginning, and that the galaxy was changing around them in ways they had never imagined. Part 4 will be written here in simple and basic English as one continuous flow without headings or chapter numbers, and it will stay in third person and avoid more than one dot. At a time while aiming for about 1,200 words, the old station slowly came to life as Alicia, Lena, and Elise. Eric worked through the long halls that had not been touched for many years. The lights glowed with uneven brightness, and the metal floors. Groaned under each step because time had not been kind to the structure. Lena explained that the station held early human defense systems from before they withdrew, and that the technology was old, but still powerful if repaired. Alicia touched one of the walls and felt dust crumble under her fingers. She said it felt strange to stand in a place built by the same species that now floated above her colony like a silent shield. Eric agreed and said the old stories had never mentioned anything like this. Lena guided them through another corridor until they reached a smaller control room. She said this was where the long-range sensors could be restarted. She argued that the predator's path might shift again, and they needed to know if it would move toward the colony sooner than expected. Alicia helped connect the power cells the humans had brought while Eric checked the stabilizers. When the console lit up with a soft glow, Lena smiled and said the station was waking one piece at a time. Alicia felt a sense of pride because she and Yoseleskosa, Eric, were helping bring something ancient back to life. The sensors hummed with a low sound as Lena adjusted the readings. A faint map appeared on the screen showing distant stars and small energy points. Lena said it would take time for the full map to load because the system needed to rebuild its memory. Alicia asked how long it would take. Lena said a few hours and asked if they could use the time to explore more sections of the station. Eric agreed because he wanted to understand more about human history. Alicia also agreed because she was curious to see what else the station might hide. They walked through a long corridor, where old metal crates were stacked against the walls. Some crates were broken, and some still sealed. Lena opened one of them and found old tools inside. She said these tools were from the early era of human expansion and were simple compared to what humans use now. Alicia asked why they kept these tools here. Lena said they were part of emergency kits in case the station needed repairs when far from the rest of their fleet. Eric picked up one of the tools and felt its weight. He said it felt heavy and strong, and he could imagine humans using these with steady hands long ago. As they moved deeper into the station, Alicia noticed old markings on the walls. They looked like symbols, but she could not read them. Lena explained they were part of an early human language no longer used. Eric asked how humans remembered their past if so much had changed. Lena said they kept records, but time and war destroyed many. She said the humans who survived kept what they could, but some history was lost forever. Alicia felt a quiet sadness because she understood what it meant to lose pieces of a culture. They reached a large room where the ceiling rose far above them. Rows of empty pods lined the walls. Lena said these pods once held drones used for deep space exploration. Alicia walked between them and imagined the drones launching one after another into the silent dark. Eric asked if any drones remained. Lena said she doubted it, but she checked a few pods anyway. Most were empty, but one held a small unit with a cracked surface. Lena said it could not fly again, but its internal core might still hold data. Alicia suggested they take it back to the main control room later. Hours passed as they explored and studied each section. When they returned to the sensor room, the map on the screen had gained more detail. Lena stepped close and checked the readings. Her expression changed, and she told Alicia and Eric to look. The predator's energy path had shifted again, and it was moving faster toward their region. Alicia felt a chill run through her body. Eric asked how much time they had. Lena said she could not be sure, but the predator was drawing closer than expected. She said the colony needed to prepare quickly. Alicia felt fear, but she pushed it down. She said they needed to alert the colony and the fleet. Lena agreed and said she would send the information to the human command ship. She also said they had to repair more of the station to keep tracking the predator. Eric asked if the humans could stop it. Lena said they could slow it down, but not alone. She said they needed alliances because the predator fed on energy and grew stronger with every destroyed system. Alicia thought about the colony and how unprepared it was. She worried about the families, the workers, the children. She said they must return soon. Lena agreed, but asked if Alicia and Eric could stay a little longer to help finish the repairs. Alicia said yes because she wanted to do everything possible to protect the colony. Eric agreed without hesitation. They worked for many hours repairing old circuits, replacing broken panels and restoring damaged software. Alicia felt tired, but she kept going. Eric moved between rooms, checking each system. Lena coordinated the repairs with calm focus. Slowly, the station grew brighter and steadier. Lena said they had revived most of the main functions. Alicia said the station felt like it was breathing again after many years of sleep. When they finished the repairs, Lena tested the long-range signal. It reached out across the stars like a thin thread. She smiled and said the station was ready. Alicia asked if they could leave now. Lena said yes, because the humans at the fleet needed the new data. Eric nodded and said it was time to return. They boarded the ship and left the station behind. Alicia looked back at it as it faded into the darkness. She felt they had awakened something important. Eric said the station might be a key part of their survival. Lena said the station was the first step, and many more steps would follow. As they returned to the colony, the fleet came into view. The human ships glowed in calm formation. Alicia felt a small comfort seeing them again. Eric said they looked like guardians, waiting for danger. Lena guided the ship to the landing field, and they stepped out into the fresh air. The colony workers who had gathered looked anxious. Alicia told them they had returned safely. She also said the Predator was moving faster than expected. A wave of fear swept through the crowd, but Alicia raised her voice to calm them. She said the humans were helping, and they had found a way to see the danger sooner. The colony leaders met them in the command hall. They listened closely as Lena explained the new readings. Some leaders looked worried, but others nodded and said they trusted Alicia's judgment. They asked what they needed to do. Lena said they must strengthen defenses, contact nearby stations, and prepare evacuation plans. She said the human fleet would protect them, but they needed to work together. Alicia said the colony must stay calm. Eric said they had a chance as long as they stayed united. As the meeting ended, Alicia walked outside and looked at the sky again. The stars looked peaceful, but she knew danger was moving behind them. The Predator was coming, and the galaxy was waking up to the threat. Eric joined her and said everything was changing too fast. Alicia said change was coming whether they wanted it or not. Lena walked to their side and said humans had faced darkness before and survived. They would face it again. Alicia felt hope rise in her chest. She knew the road ahead would be hard, but she also knew she was not alone. The humans had returned not as ghosts, but as allies. She looked toward the fleet and understood that their presence would shape the future. The colony stood on the edge of great danger, but also on the edge of great possibility. The next days would decide everything. Eric moved across the deck of the command field with slow steps as the warning lights brightened in the sky above the colony because the shape of the enemy force had finally reached the outer zone, and every person could feel the weight of the moment rise in their chest. As they watched the dark forms spread around the stars, Alicia stood close to the main display and tried to keep her voice steady as she explained. The final attack lines to the teams because she knew every second mattered now, and she tried not to let fear show on her face. Lena moved with calm discipline as she led her group of armored Marines toward the defense hub where the ancient systems waited in silence because she knew the time had come to use the last weapons humanity had left behind so long ago. Maya watched the distant shapes draw closer, and she kept tracking every shift in their formation because she understood that any small detail could change the outcome of the first great stand, and she wanted to give her new allies the best chance to stay alive. Daniel stood near the command table and spoke to the distant leaders of the nearby star systems because he knew they needed coordination more than anything now, and he tried to calm the fear in the voices coming through the channels. The enemy force moved like a living storm as their large ships broke from the shadows and the pressure from their drive fields pushed against the colony, shields as if to warn them that the first strike was moments away. Eric moved toward his fighter with quick steps, and he tried to steady his breathing while he linked his visual feed to the fleet pattern humans had shared, and he listened to the calm voice of the human command unit guiding him through the launch sequence because the sense of order helped him stay focused. Alicia followed the movement of the ground units as they took positions around the defense walls, and she made sure every squad had the right fields active because she knew that if even one gap formed, the enemy would use it without hesitation. Lena reached the ancient weapon hub and placed her. Hand on the activation plate, and the walls around her lit with slow rising energy, as if awakening from a long sleep, because the systems recognized the presence of a human commander. Maya moved toward the outer ridge with her team to set the last signal markers. As she spoke to Eric through the come line about the final locations, because she knew he would guide the first strike group with precision when the enemy forced their way in. Daniel finished speaking with the Allied leaders, and he tried to give them confidence, because fear spread fast when the enemy appeared, and he knew they would need every voice steady in order to hold the line. The enemy ships fired the first wave, and the sky lit with streams of burning energy as the colony's shields struggled to stay stable, and Alicia shouted the first defense commands. As the ground units began returning fire, Eric launched from the deck with the rest of the strike group, and he felt the sudden weight vanish as he entered open space, and he followed the human command signals that moved like a rhythm through his display, because they helped him understand where to strike first. Lena activated the full strength of the ancient network, and the ground shook with a deep pulse as the energy towers rose from beneath the surface and sent a wide beam of light across the sky toward the enemy formation, because the system reacted with the force humans had once used to reshape battlefields. Maya moved her team away from the ridge as the next wave of energy passed overhead, and she kept her eyes on the sky where Eric and the others flew, because she understood that the strike teams needed constant guidance to avoid the enemy traps. Daniel watched the early battle unfold, and he opened every channel to keep the Allied fleets aligned, because small errors in timing could break the front lines at any moment. The enemy force pushed deeper and split into multiple groups to overwhelm the defenses, and Alicia ordered the units to adjust formation as she saw part of the colony wall begin to fall under the pressure, but the human energy towers shifted to focus on that weak point and held the ground together long enough for the defense crews to repair the shield line. Eric reached the front of the battle and locked onto the nearest enemy craft, and he moved with sharp precision as he used the attack paths shared by the human fleet, because they showed him exactly where the enemy armor was weakest. Lena guided the ancient network to redirect its power into the upper atmosphere, and she spoke into the command line to warn Alicia that the next release would shake the area, so the ground units had to brace. Maya pushed through the lower alleys with her team, and she kept sending quick updates to the command group, because the enemy formation changed every time they were hit, and she knew the defenders needed clear data. Daniel worked to guide the Allied reinforcements into place, and he saw the moment when the enemy began losing formation as the human fleet arrived behind them and cut off their retreat. Alicia felt a moment of relief as the human ships entered the battle, and their bright engines lit the sky, but she kept her focus on the ground, because the enemy still pushed forward in dangerous waves. Eric flew beside human fighters, and he felt the strange sense of unity as they moved together with exact timing and cut through the enemy line with a level of force he had never seen before. Lena released the full surge of the ancient weapon, and a massive beam spread across the battlefield like a rising sun, and the enemy vanguard broke apart under the strike, because the old human technology still carried the strength of a lost age. Maya felt the shockwave pass through the ridge, and she held her position as the ground trembled, but when the light faded, she saw that the enemy front had collapsed at last. Daniel opened the come lines and spoke to all Allied groups, telling them to move forward, because the enemy was falling back, and the combined forces needed to secure the area before another wave arrived. Alicia watched her units advance as the sky cleared, and she felt her shoulders relaxed for the first time in hours because they had survived the first great stand together. Eric landed his fighter on the deck and stepped out with slow, tired movements. As he looked at the sky and realized that the legends of humans were true because he had seen their strength with his own eyes, Lena powered down the ancient network as the towers lowered back into the ground. And she felt the weight of the moment because humanity had returned to stand with the galaxy again. Maya joined Alicia near the defense wall, and they shared a quiet moment as the dust settled because they understood that the battle would continue in the future. But they had proven something important today. Daniel sent the final message to the Allied fleets, telling them that the line held because unity and courage had turned the tide. The colony stood in the calm that followed the storm, and every person looked at the sky with a new feeling because they knew that the legends of humans were not stories anymore, and the galaxy had entered a new age, where they would stand together as one.